everyone, this is John Liu with H&M Realty Group. The pandemic has caused a lot of concerns over the job market, and a lot of Americans are out of a job right now. So today I have a special guest with me, Natasha Alladina, who I first met in law school. And then after a long career where she was working at some of the biggest law firms in the US, the Georgia Supreme Court, and also with some nonprofits, she went into legal recruiting and is now with the Partners Group. And she's agreed to join us to give us some tips on the job market and how we could better adjust to the current climate. So welcome, Natasha. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, wanted to start with just kind of getting a little bit of general advice that you could give us with what to do in today's job market.
Yeah, well, we're in an unprecedented time with unemployment numbers, so it is a scary time. Every day there are more and more people losing their jobs, getting furloughed. So, the first thing is to give yourself some grace, is what I would want people to know, that this isn't something to feel like you're alone in. I think it's important to take some time and allow yourself to feel all those feelings so that you can cope and then move forward with a game plan, whether that is revamping your resume or rethinking where you want your career to go. But the first thing is to give yourself some grace.
Oh, and then, you mentioned the people that are furloughed and stuff like that. I know that there's a lot of people that are kind of in this state of limbo where, they're not laid off yet, but they don't know if they're going to have a job or the company they were with is even going to be there when this is all said and done. For those types of people, what kind of advice can you give them?
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in, right? Because who knows how long you've been with this company too. You've got company loyalty at play. You just don't know how things might change in the next month or 3 months. So I do think it's best to have a backup plan in place. So you might be, furloughed and still have benefits. Maybe you're furloughed and you're not actually having much work to do at all. Best case for you to set yourself up for success in the future is to go ahead and start networking like crazy, meeting new people, getting active on social media, creating content to show what you're a subject matter expert in, and revamping your resume and putting those pieces in place just so in case your company isn't able to bring you back on, you're not starting from scratch. You've kind of got all of your materials ready to roll and can get out there.
Yeah. And then when we're talking about social media, a lot of it's moving more towards that. Everything's kind of going more digitally these days. What kind of tips do you have for like the content you should be posting, or even, I saw a post that you did about taglines and stuff like that. How can we best leverage technology and social media in our job searches?
Yeah. So I think when a lot of people think of social media, they think Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I'm not on it, but it's fun. And that's all fun. But for me, LinkedIn is where it's at. I can tell you as a recruiter, not only in the legal industry, but across all industries, recruiters are on LinkedIn looking for candidates. And the best way you can set yourself up to be found by a recruiter is to have a specific headline on your LinkedIn profile. So, the best example I can give is for a lawyer, right? If you say you're an associate at XYZ firm, fine, but that doesn't really tell me much about the type of law you practice. Mm-hmm. If you said I'm a technology transactions associate at XYZ firm, I help mid-market companies do whatever, those keywords will help you get found. So the first tip I would have is to get on LinkedIn and fill out your profile. Make sure your headline is super specific because that'll hook a recruiter. And then make sure that your profile is filled out as much as possible. Inject some personality into it. There's an About Me section where you can get pretty silly, or whatever your personality is. I'll tell you, mine starts with a play on a Mean Girls quote because that is just me. But LinkedIn is really a place where you can, it's not your resume. It's a place for your personality. It's a place to show your subject matter expertise. Not only have your profile though, get active. It can feel weird at first, but the comment sections on LinkedIn are lit. I kid you not. I have met so many people in quarantine times by just commenting on their posts. And then I find that those people comment on mine, and I meet more and more people in kind of a domino effect. So yeah, in terms of social media, get on LinkedIn, fill out your profile, make sure you have a rockin' headline, tagline, whatever you want to call it, and then get active.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned it's okay to be silly. So obviously my personality, I kind of go that route as well.
Which is why we're friends.
Yeah, where do we draw the line? Like, where does it go too far? Or like, what's a good way to gauge when you've kind of gone too far?
You know, one, have someone else check over your stuff, right? Because I have to do that too, because I can get a little too silly. So I am married to a very much more serious type, and he can curb that. So definitely get a second opinion and kind of put yourself in the shoes of a hiring manager, right? There's a difference between injecting a little bit of personality and then taking it to a place that it's unprofessional.
Gotcha.
So I'd say err on the side of professional, but I've seen in some headlines, they'll have their job description and then maybe also say coffee enthusiast, right? So it's a little bit of something, but you're limited by space. Best practices, have one or two people check it over and ask them what they think.
Makes sense. And then, we talked about the industries, how there's some that are a little bit more resistant to change and stuff like that. The law being one of them. I think my first firm I worked at, they were still running like Windows XP or something like that. And I'm getting older, but like this was in 2011. So it was like probably like 10, 15 years old by then.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with like an industry that is kind of the traditional old guard and not really too keen on changing things, would you still kind of go with that route, or do you have to adjust when you're addressing those types of industries?
I think you have to be mindful of the industry, right? So in terms of, to give you an example, resumes, as you said, legal industry is definitely more conservative. I know that in other industries, they'll have graphics, and the resume will look really cool and stylistic, but with law, that's just not going to fly. So it's knowing your industry, but at the same time, I think that you can be an asset if you show that you know technology and you are innovative. So I know that every industry is different, but with recruiting, Zoom was not necessarily a way that we did interviews. It was all in person. So we had a makeshift technology committee that I was on, and I helped figure out Zoom and other ways that we can move interviewing to a virtual platform. So if you kind of step up and volunteer as someone who's willing to put their toes in the water for technology or other things that your industry isn't normally excited to jump into, then that can be a way to distinguish yourself. But it's also, you just be mindful of your industry and know what the audience is.
Gotcha. And then, so, I've been hearing it since the quarantine started that it's like on the business side, those that can adapt and adjust are the ones that are going to survive and thrive. What kind of adjustments should we be making on the job seeker side in terms of not just like looking for a job, but finding them, kind of standing out, and then even when you actually get interviews and stuff, is there certain things that we should be doing to show that we can make that change in those adjustments?
Yeah, several things. The first thing that comes to mind is visibility, right? And that applies to people who have jobs right now. A lot of people are working virtually, so they don't have that benefit of stopping by someone's office to say hi and staying top of mind. So checking in, emailing the people you currently work with. If you don't have a job right now, it is upping your networking game like no other, but doing it in a way that's genuine, right? When you reach out to folks on LinkedIn who might have a job that looks interesting to you, personalize your message to them when you send a connection request. Tell them why you're reaching out. What is it about their career that's interested to you? And you're more apt to find yourself in a longer conversation than with that person. With respect to your resume and showing adaptability, if you are going for a role that doesn't directly line up with your experience, really take a good hard look at the job description. Look up the hiring managers on LinkedIn. Try to get as much info as you can on the company and the job. Look at your experience and tailor your resume in a truthful way and highlight the experiences you've had that could be transferable to the job that you're applying for. And know that just because a job has, 15 different things they're looking for, even if you don't have all of those, doesn't mean you don't need to apply. It's getting strategic and figuring out what this company is hiring for. What role do they want this person to come in? What problems do they want this person to come in and solve? And look at your past experience and figure out how you would be able to do that and tell that story. It's all about telling a story. I think in terms of showing you're adaptable, it's telling your story, showing how you've been adaptable in the past and how you are ready and willing to come in and make things happen and have the experience to do so.
Yeah. I love that. That totally makes sense too. Because when you see like the job postings and stuff, it seems like it's like a dream wish list, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I got a job where I think it was probably like 10 things that they wanted. And I only had experience doing one. Ended up getting the job, but it was because that was the one that they really, really needed. And then the rest was just kind of like a hope and a prayer. But
yeah. I think wish list is a good way to put it. And then the other thing is don't discount personality, right? Like enthusiasm and that intangible fit thing is always going to matter. So when you're looking people up and you get this sense that like, oh, these people are people I would vibe with, lean into that. I hate that word. I can't believe I just said lean in. But, it's true because it's likely that the people you think you're going to click with, you could click with, maybe not, but it's good to pay attention to those feelings that you get as you're reading and learning about different people and companies.
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of a new concept, but since interviews are being done on Zoom, are there ways, like they have like the body language stuff that we learned that, mirror and stuff like that. It's a little bit different though when you're not in person. Do you think those rules still apply?
Yes and no. I think one, the world is more understanding of the fact that there is a life outside of the 9-to-5 job. That said, I do think you want to make sure that you can be in as quiet of a space as possible. Something like a background like this, a white background, minimal distractions. When you're talking to a person, I'm not doing it now, but try to do a mix of talking directly into the camera and then looking at them because you don't want to be a robot.
Yeah.
And the good thing is with Zoom interviews, you could have your notes right next to you, which to me is an even better advantage.
It's a cheat sheet.
Yeah. And it's also just remembering that it's the person on the other side would rather be in person doing this interview as well. So just be yourself and forget the fact that it's a video, right? And make sure your volume works, do a test run beforehand. But other than that, the best thing you can do is be yourself.
Gotcha. And then, so we came out of law school around in 2011, but it was, it's kind of similar job market, I would say. We were still recovering from the 2008 crash and things like that. So it probably wasn't as bad, but I remember vividly, like when I was searching for a job and it was a tough time, I was very stressed out. It's super frustrating. And then, I was going through dark moments where, you get these bouts of feeling depressed. What kind of advice can you give to people who are going through that?
Yeah. I'm someone who is very prone to anxiety, and I think that's a shared experience that a lot of people are feeling right now. And I know that everyone deals with mental health issues differently, but my advice would be to talk it out. Find those trusted people in your life, family and friends that you could talk it out. If you find that that's not getting you where you need, look into therapy. There are a lot of great therapists who are doing these kind of virtual meetups that can be really effective. And then, it's such a buzzword, but self-care, whatever that means to you. I mean, for me, I'll be honest, it's like watching 2 episodes of Ozark and just zoning out. For others, it's yoga, it's whatever, working out, whatever it is for you, finding that, because job search is hard. It is draining. It's frustrating. It makes you feel less than at times.
Yeah.
And kind of what I was saying at the beginning, it's about giving yourself grace to feel all those feelings, do whatever you need to do to self-care so that you can come back and get in the game, get focused, and do all the things that you need to do for the job search process, a lot of which is networking, which in and of itself is draining.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember, so I can't remember who told me it, but during that time, they were just like, it only takes one. And I was like, oh, that's so
Mhm.
true. Like all the rejections and all that stuff, really, it only takes one. So that kind of helped give me a light at the end of the tunnel. So,
Oh yeah, and then to get to that one, the people who put all their efforts into networking
mhm.
and reaching out to alums from the schools they went to, people that they used to work with, and ask those people to connect them if they feel that they know someone who would be helpful and if they feel comfortable doing so, those people are going to have a much better time and have much more success because those stats are real about applying online. 200 jobs or 200 people applying for one job. Those odds, they suck, right?
Yeah.
So you're much better off putting your efforts into strategic networking.
Mhm.
If you find a recruiter that you really like and trust, build a relationship with them too, and kind of put your feelers out there in different ways because it's a tough thing, but we're also seeing great stories of people getting jobs. Yes, there's a lot of unemployment, but there are some really great I found a job stories happening all the time, which is really encouraging.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And in normal times where they had all these networking events and things like that that you could go to. Do you know of any alternatives or ways that you could do it right now? Maybe creative things that you've
Mhm.
seen?
Yeah. And so I'm a big extrovert. I've always liked those big networking events, which I know a lot of people.
Really?
I know. A lot of people are just like, oh, it's just passing cards around and like talking about the weather and it sucks. Um, the creative thing that I've said, I'm going to sound like such a LinkedIn nerd, but honestly, LinkedIn is so helpful for networking because it just makes it easy.
Yeah.
All you have to do is start following people, start commenting on their posts. You become known to them. You can eventually take that to sending them a message to connect.
Mhm.
I've so many conversations go from that pathway of following, commenting to the DMs to phone calls to Zoom. Um, it makes networking easy. So yeah, you're not in a room with a bunch of people, but guess what? When you go to those events, how many people do you actually meet and really connect with anyway, right?
Like,
It's
usually
much.
none. I usually walk away with cards and then forget.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have a slight buzz because you drank wine or beer or whatever too fast because you're like, this is annoying. I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
But with LinkedIn, you can be targeted and you can really get to a more genuine connection by being intentional, right? By following people, by commenting, by caring about what they're putting out there in the world, and then also creating your own content. It's scary, and it's something I'm just starting to explore by making posts myself based on what I'm seeing with the recruiting world, and I've been getting calls from law students and lawyers, and then just trying to take some of that info and put it out there in the world in case it's helpful.
Yeah.
And I've been getting a good response. So, if you're a job seeker and you start, for instance, if you're a real estate attorney and you start posting more about issues in the real estate world, given
Mhm.
COVID and whatnot, the more you do that, the more people will see it and the more visible you'll get. And then people will come to you. So LinkedIn is not only a place where you can go and find people that you're interested in talking to based on your own goals. If you create content, they'll come to you, which isn't that the best way to network? It's like
Yeah. Way easier.
the path of least resistance. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, so stepping back away from the COVID stuff, just more generally, what
Mhm.
are kind of your top tips for job seekers?
Ooh, there are many. The
Okay, let's pick top three.
Okay. So the first is to really know your story, right? If you're someone like me who had a ton of jobs, be able to explain why you made the different transitions. And then on the flip side, be able to really articulate your goals and how your past experience will translate well into whatever role you're applying for. Secondly, network. Just, I know I've said that a ton, but man, I'm a recruiter and I'm saying the best way to get a job is not through me, it is through networking.
Yeah.
Um, and being strategic about it, being genuine about it, and just please never ask for the job. Get to know someone first.
Yeah.
I think that's something you hear all the time. It really is true. Um, So yeah, knowing your story, networking, and then giving yourself some grace, because it's a tough thing to go through the job search process. But be persistent, give yourself some grace. Sometimes it's going to just be like, this is all too much, I don't want to do it anymore. Take that break so that you come back and be ready to roll and keep on trucking.
Awesome. And then on the flip side of that, what are kind of the most common mistakes that you see from candidates?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of these ones too.
Yeah, it's funny. I instantly start thinking of certain people.
Don't use names.
Yeah, I won't. Yeah, confidentiality for sure. Not being targeted. You know, if you're not targeted and you're spewing your resume and your resume is really generic, you come off as desperate, and that is the last thing you want. You don't come off as a serious candidate who's excited about the job. Employers want people who are pumped about their company, about their job. So candidates who do not tailor their resume, that is going to be, they're just setting themselves up for an uphill battle. Another thing is not knowing their story, right? Like what I was going back to is kind of the opposite of what I was saying. They just say, well, I did this job and then I did this one. Mm-hmm. And they come off as kind of a dud then. And then thirdly, it would be not really thinking about what it is that you do want to do and why, because then you might find yourself in a situation where you're just applying for, and I'm saying this because I did that, you just apply to all of these different places and see what sticks. But then even if you get to a job, you might find that you're unhappy. So it's better to take the time to do that introspective work instead of, the whole throw out a bunch of resumes and see what happens.
Makes sense. And then I guess since you are a recruiter, I know it's a very niche area that you're in the legal recruiting field, but, what kind of advice do you have for people that are considering working with a recruiter versus looking, on their own, going on LinkedIn networking and stuff like that? What's kind of the best way to work with a recruiter, and what situations does it kind of benefit them the most?
Yeah. So I'd say find a recruiter who knows your industry really well. There are some that recruit for all different industries, and that's fine, but I think it's really helpful to find someone who really knows your industry and is someone that you feel comfortable with, because again, the job search process is tough, it's frustrating, so you want someone you feel really comfortable with. And in terms of working with a recruiter, I know some people like to work with several different recruiters. I don't recommend that though, because you might find that you're in a situation you can't quite remember who submitted you for what job, and the last thing you want is to have your stuff submitted by two different people, because it makes you seem disorganized as a candidate, and that's again it's not the vibe you want to give off. So I would say find one recruiter that you're really comfortable with, maybe two, but if it's two, then be really careful about be on top of where you're being submitted, and make sure that your recruiter takes confidentiality extremely seriously, and that they never submit you for a job without your express approval. I've heard some horror stories from candidates, and it's awful, but apparently it happens. So just make sure you find someone with a lot of integrity, someone that you can trust, and you can kind of get a good vibe. Talk to a few people first, right? Like same thing with finding a realtor. Talk to a few people, find the person that you're comfortable with, and then go from there. And in terms of, applying online and networking on your own versus working with a recruiter, the benefit of working with a recruiter is that we have a direct line of communication with a hiring manager. Mm-hmm. So, let's say you apply for a job online, but I'm recruiting for that same job. The people that I present are going to get seen first before, going through all of those different applications. And oftentimes, if a company is working with a recruiter, it's because they haven't had much luck finding people just on their own. Mm-hmm. And another thing with recruiters is we are well versed in the hidden job market. That's the best way to describe it, right? Because a lot of organizations will hire opportunistically, and we know that because of our relationships with them. So like we've placed folks at firms that weren't necessarily hiring, but we know that they are always going to be opportunistic about a really high caliber candidate. Yeah. So that's another good reason to work with a recruiter. But you got to find someone that you click with, because otherwise it's what's the point,
Yeah. I mean, and then, so how do you see the role of a recruiter versus, with the candidate, like who's supposed to be doing what? And I'm sure it's
Mhm.
different for all recruiters. They all function differently, but kind of towards you, where do you
Yeah.
see the roles and where the dividing lines are?
So the one thing to know is that my client is ultimately going to be the law firm or the company that I am working for, and they have a certain set of criteria they're looking for in a candidate.
Yeah.
So the part that's tough about being a recruiter is you want to help everybody, but you can't necessarily help everybody because you got to find who your client wants.
Yep.
But from the candidate's perspective, if I'm talking to a candidate who's interested in a specific job, you can set yourself up for a successful working relationship with a recruiter by being open and honest, right? Telling them exactly where you've applied on your own.
Mhm.
Again, because you don't want to be coming at a certain job with a recruiter submitting you, but then you also submit yourself. It just comes off as disorganized. So being upfront about where you've applied, being upfront about your goals, anything that you feel might make you not as desirable, don't be shy about it, because your recruiter's job is to help tell your story in the best light possible, right? So if you aren't as excited about your grades,
Mhm.
then just say so. And if you were going through a tough time one year in school, just say so, and your recruiter can then better tell your story.
Mhm.
And then for me as a recruiter, I really like to be hands-on. So I do a thorough resume review for all my candidates, and I'll even edit it in Word and send it back to them. I like to help my candidates prepare for interviews. It's just fun for me because that's the kind of thing I nerd out about. I'm pretty hands-on. Different recruiters have different approaches, and communication. Both parties just need to be in constant communication, because the job search process can be really slow at times, but then it can pick up really fast, and you want to be staying on the ball. So you want to be in constant communication with your recruiter. Like for my candidates, they have my cell phone number, so if they need me, they can get me right away.
Yeah. So now I have to ask, what are your best tips for, I guess, the resume, and then your best tips for interviewing?
Yeah. So for your resume, it would be to be targeted, be specific, know the job, really think about your past experience and what from your past experience would resonate well for the people who are hiring for this particular job. Be truthful about what you've done, but take the time to tailor your resume. What I like to advise people is to have kind of your master resume, and then for each job, depending on what they're looking for, tailor your resume. The other job tip would be, or resume tip would be, to be specific. I think a lot of people will talk about their jobs in a generic way, and that doesn't give the hiring manager enough of an idea of what you actually did, and that's what they want to know. And remember that your resume isn't a job description. You don't want to just put did this, did that, did that. They want to know what impact. Hiring managers want to know what impact you had. And in some industries, it's easier to show that, but think about accomplishments. Think about, what did you do in the time you were there that made a difference to your company? What did you get praise for? Think through those questions and make sure that your resume reflects those accomplishments. So yeah, for resume, it's being targeted and being specific and showing accomplishments. And then for interviewing, it's knowing your story, kind of going back to what we were talking about, being able to articulate your story, of course. I messed that word up. As soon as I'm talking about articulating your story, of course. So don't do that. But if you do, whatever, laugh it off. So knowing your story and telling it in a compelling way, and then knowing everything about the company, research the shit out of the company, know what they do, know who their clients are, and show that you know all of that, because what that'll do is it'll show the hiring manager that this is someone who's done their research and they're really freaking excited about our company. And guess what? People want people who are excited about their company because that signals to them that they're going to come in and they're going to put in the work to make things happen because they're so excited to be there. So, for your interview, know your story and then show that enthusiasm by doing your research.
Such a good tip. I remember during OCIs, I won't say the firm because I'm too embarrassed, but they had like an office in Japan. So I interviewed for that one. And then I don't know why, but I was heading towards litigation, but obviously they wouldn't do litigation in Japan because you're not licensed over there. But then I kind of got choked up and then they were like, oh, what are you interested in? I said litigation. Did not get that job. Like they kind of hung up right away.
But and that's the thing, right? There are going to be interviews like that. It sucks, but you just learn and move on. And
yeah, definitely learn from that.
Yeah. And then part of me also thinks that sometimes things aren't meant to be, right? Like my mom would always say that growing up. I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But I'm starting to believe that as an adult, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So any last tips that you could give or words of encouragement? Kind of the floor is yours.
Yeah. I'd say words of encouragement is more my angle because it's a tough time. It's not just a job search right now. If you're in that place, it's a job search in a freaking pandemic, right? Like you're already dealing with everything happening in the world and however that's affected your home life. So give yourself some grace and know that you're not alone. There are a lot of people who are experiencing this. If you're out looking for a job and having some trouble finding one right now, there are a lot of people who have jobs who really are empathizing and therefore are more willing to talk to you. So definitely don't be shy about networking and reaching out to people because we're all feeling a lot more vulnerable and want to be there. That's the one silver lining that I have seen from this quarantine is that people are willing to take 20, 30 minutes out of their day to talk to someone, tell them about their job. They want to help in whatever way they can. So keep at it. And we will all get out of this. We will be talking about this in, as a thing that happened, kind of the way we do with the Great Recession. It's just going to be tough for a little while.
I just thought of another question. Sorry. And so, there's people that are right now probably can't work, right? Like, let's say like the childcare thing's going on, or, they might be affected directly by COVID, but eventually we'll have to find a job, afterwards. Would you recommend that they start searching now? Can I kind of be honest with their timeline? It's difficult, with the uncertainty since we don't know when this is going to end or things like that. But should they wait until there's more kind of stability in where they're at, or should they just start the process now?
Definitely start the process now because you just never know how long it'll take. And the more comfortable you are with articulating your story, if you have all of your materials ready to go, you just never know when an opportunity will strike. And if for any reason, given your circumstances, you aren't able to start right away, that's a conversation that can be had after you get the job. But you're better served by just putting in the effort as soon as you can. Because again, everything's uncertain. We just don't know. And you'd rather be prepared than not. Yeah,
definitely. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, this is John Liu with H&M Realty Group. Thank you guys for watching.